The Highest Result of Education is Tolerance by Helen Keller. We're all exposed to intolerance on a daily basis. Most of us not personally, but through our TVs, books, and newspapers. It's probably quite showing of where our society stands currently by our fixation on violence and intolerance. Russell Bishop once wrote, "Surely teaching intolerance and fear is hardly the way," in his article, "Are we becoming a nation of intolerance?" Growing up, I was exposed and I experienced intolerance on a virtually daily basis, so I can tell you it's not a good place to be on that side of the fence. In fact, it actually disrupted my social life for years after I actually experienced intolerance. TV can be a powerful instrument to convey messages because when we watch TV, our guard is usually down. We're there to be entertained, not to be nitpicking everything that we see before us. But we can choose to watch shows that actually just present optimistic views of people and their actions. So I'm going to share one with you, and even though it's a slightly darker version of this show that I love so much, it can show you that even from really dark places we can become enlightened and change our ways. I'll share this with you in 3 parts for continuity's sake: what's happening, why it's happening, and how it resolved itself. Dozens of miners were being killed in this mining colony. The perpetrator eluded capture at every turn. Eventually, the miners were forced to call for outside assistance, which brings in our protagonist into the story. The miners hoped that our protagonist's seemingly superior technology would help solve the case. However, it would turn out that it was the enlightened minds that helped them solve these problems. Now that we explored what was happening, let's move on to why. As the investigation intensified, a lot of the miners by this time decided they weren't going to mine until the killer was caught. But there were some who still mined. And it turned out that miners were only killed when they were actually mining. So our protagonist figured there must be something that the miners are doing that is triggering this violent reaction. And they were correct. When they actually did catch up to the killer and communicate with the killer, it turns out that the miners were killing the unborn for which the killer was there to protect. So the killer was reacting with violence to violence, and nobody knew why until then. Now that we explored why it was happening, let's move on to how it resolves itself. When the miners became aware of what they were doing, inadvertently, they stopped. They stopped the mining until they could figure out where the unborn were and how to safely navigate around them. In turn, the killer stopped killing them and in fact helped them navigate the mines without disrupting the young so they can get to the ore they were after without bringing harm to anyone. So even though this is kind of a really dark starting point, they still reached an amicable solution in which no one else was harmed. Intolerance tends to be born out of ignorance, and this was kind of the cycle that was perpetuated. They didn't know what they were doing, but they did it. Then reaction was made, however violent, and then they sought to respond to that violence with violence. This is obviously a work of fiction from a show called Star Trek by man Gene Roddenberry, which you may have heard of. I really enjoyed the show because it presented an optimistic appraisal of what human can be, an alien can be, when we decide to put our differences aside and journey on mutually beneficial expeditions and such. There was a humanist article written that says, for over 5 decades, Star Trek remained positive, philosophical, and moral, portraying a society built on enlightened values, which I agree with. We have choices in what we watch. I prefer my choices to be more thought-provoking and entertaining rather than violent and base nature activities just for the sake of such. Another article I read by Natalia Haynes says all science fiction is really 2 stories: the world it's set in and the world it's written in. So a lot of science fiction is how people present societal issues hidden under the guise of entertainment, and sometimes that's helpful in how people process it. In any event, I want to thank you all for listening to my speech on the show that I love very much and will continue to love, and hopefully you'll pick up an episode or two and watch it yourself.